Hi, today we're going to make a vegetarian chili. It can also be easily converted to a vegan chili, or there's also options to make it gluten-free as well. So it starts off pretty basic. It's mostly like a spicy, rich bean soup because there's no meat, obviously. That's usually a big component. So we start off with a large onion. We're going to dice this up. I use store-bought mix. That's okay by me. So I use 2 packs of mix because it makes a lot of chili. This is a big serving recipe. I use one that's hot and one that's regular. This one actually is a little bit reduced sodium because there's plenty of other sodium in the beans. The basics, we always do kidney beans, and we've got tomatoes. I'm using fire roasted tomatoes. You could use 2 cans or 1 big can, doesn't really matter. I like them to give them just a little bit more depth of flavor with the fire roasted quality. And then we kind of depart from the land of normal chili. Right, so those are the things that we usually find in most chilies we think about as a basic, normal, conventional chili. We're going to bring in some more beans that we don't see in maybe everyday kind of meat chili recipes. And that's going to be white beans. These are great northern beans. You can also use cannellini. It's just a size difference, really. And then black beans, pinto beans, and garbanzo beans. And the reason I like to do all these different ones, it gives you some variety in there, and it makes some different textures, and it just makes a more kind of interesting, hearty, satisfying chili. 2 things that I put in chili that I think maybe you don't see again in every vegetarian chili is hominy, canned hominy. This one I do drain. The liquid in this is not going to help make a nice broth. It has a distinct taste to it that I don't really think would be very good. So I do drain this one. This is the one thing I do drain. And the reason I use hominy, it's kind of like that note of corn. It's a type of corn, but it's not so sweet like a sweet corn, like a yellow corn. So that you get some of that note that's not just like beans and chili beans and peppers. You get something that's a little bit different texture and flavor, but it's not super sweet like yellow corn. And then the thing that really helps kind of round out that kind of brothy component of the chili is a can of pumpkin puree. And if you say, oh, I don't like pumpkin, it doesn't leave a really pumpkin-y taste. It's a little bit earthy, but more than anything, it just makes the kind of brothy part of the chili really kind of thick, and it gives it a lot of body. It also makes it a little healthier too. It's really good for you. So this is pumpkin puree, not pumpkin pie in a can. Make sure you're careful when you do that because you don't want to introduce all those spices. The other reason I really love this chili is that all these things are pretty much always in my pantry. It's a really easy thing to throw together. It only takes about maybe 20 minutes to pull together and become a thing. And if it sits a little bit longer, the flavors kind of mesh and marry a little bit, but once it's kind of all pulled through to up to temperature, you're pretty much ready to go. So as long as you can saute an onion, you're good to go there. The way to make this a gluten-free recipe, check these type of things really carefully. A lot of these seasoning mixes will have just a little bit of wheat flour in them. That helps, again, thicken up the broth component of the chili. So you would probably need to make your own or look for a gluten-free version of this. It's kind of irritating that they stick that in there, but it's an easy way for that to thicken up the broth. So I've done this for a gluten-free group before, where I made my own spice mix out of dried chili and garlic, and some salt, and a few other things, just kind of some coriander, I think, and things like that. So it's easy to do that. You just want to make sure you either buy a packet mix that is gluten-free, or you can make your own. We're going to move to the kitchen and get the onions started. We're in the kitchen. We've got our onion chopped. We've got our pot heating up. One thing I didn't tell you, I use olive oil usually. If you're not concerned about this being a vegan chili, you can certainly use butter. It's going to add a little bit of different richness, and it's more than maybe you usually would use for just like sauteing onions by themselves or as a component for something else. You can put a fair amount of oil in this to help kind of build up the fat content in the soup. It's a pretty lean chili, which upping the fat just a little bit helps give it that kind of richer flavor. It sticks with you a little bit longer. If you're really watching fat, you can certainly get by with probably about a tablespoon. I'm going to use around 4 tablespoons. One thing I do, just a kitchen tip, I usually buy olive oil in a bigger kind of container, but I don't like using that for cooking. It's hard to kind of measure out or kind of even eyeball out. So I got a smaller olive oil bottle that I'd use the contents of. I got one of those liquor pourers, and I just leave that in the top. And I just leave this in the cabinet. I use it often enough that it gets emptied pretty frequently, so there's no problem with it going bad, or I never had any problem with pests or anything. So this is a handy thing. It just saves me a lot of time. We're going to put our generous kind of swoop of olive oil in there. I'm going to just cover the bottom of this pan, which is a pretty big pan, and go ahead and get our onions in there. It's a good sound. Since this is not a non-stick pan, I'm using a wooden spoon, and I'm going to put just a little bit of coarse salt in there, just to help those onions start to lose moisture and break down just a little bit. And we're going to let that go while that's starting to warm up, saute, break down. We're going to open a bunch of cans, because that's the rest of this recipe. So with garbanzo beans, sometimes I get some of the starch kind of gathers in the bottom of the can. So before I open these, I always actually just give them a good shake, and it helps you get some of that stuff out without having to rinse out the can. And again, that's going to help us build up our broth. We've got our onions cooking down right now. There's still plenty of oil in the bottom of the pan. And I'm actually going to put both packets of our seasoning mix in there now and let that kind of cook into the oil a little bit. I think it helps get that the oil, that kind of flavor component, seasoned, and it lets those spices kind of bloom out, and you get a lot more from your seasonings if you let those just kind of mix together just for a few minutes here. One of my very good friends used to tell me that fat is the magical carpet on which flavor rides, and it always stuck with me, and it was very funny, but it's also really true. You need that little bit of fat and oil, to make things kind of pop out, and I think getting the seasoning in at this point really helps the seasoning kind of pull out away from all the vegetables, and kind of make a tastier soup. So we've got our spices in here. They're kind of, meshed and married with that oil. Everything's kind of got this kind of pasty spice quality to it. The onions are soft. They're not totally clear, but they're soft enough we can move forward. It's probably been maybe 5 or 6 minutes since we started cooking the onions, and maybe about a minute with the spices in here. And that's just, letting them toast and mesh with that oil. We're gonna start putting our cans in. I always start with tomatoes. They're kind of the juiciest. Within it, the liquid in there is great flavoring. It also has the least starch, so it's gonna help get some of the spice off the bottom of the pan. Pan is pretty hot. I'm up, not like one step back from all the way. Again, I cook this on pretty high heat, and it all pulls together pretty fast. That's what makes it a faster recipe. It's not an 8-hour chili that needs to sit for a really long time. It's fine if it does. You can do it in a crock pot too, but it doesn't need all that time because all of our components are already cooked. Tomatoes are in. We kind of scraped all the sauce off the bottom of the pan. You can see the pan. When we see it, it's pretty clean. So we know that spice mixture has kind of worked its way into the tomatoes and their liquid. So now we're going to dump all of our beans. We've got our white beans, and again, we're using that liquid. If you really don't want to use liquid, you could drain and rinse these. I would just say make sure you supplement that liquid back in either with water or a vegetable broth. If you're not worried about this being vegetarian, you could use chicken broth, I guess. That would give you some of that kind of salt and flavor back that you missed from the liquid. We've got our black beans. And that liquid, even though it's dark, it's still not gonna take over this broth. We've got our kidney beans, standard chili option that really I think makes this feel the most like chili. And that's really the only thing I keep these around for. I don't use kidney beans for a whole lot else. garbanzo beans, chickpeas, whatever you like to call them. Again, a really nice different texture and flavor. And then I usually get these mixed in, just make sure you're combined. And let those warm up just a little bit, and then we'll do the pumpkin and the hominy last. So we've got our pumpkin and our hominy. I usually get all the beans in and mixed before I do these last two. The hominy is a little bit delicate, and the pumpkin is really kind of thick and pasty. So to get that out of the can, one quick little hint, give me 1 second. Grab your can opener, and after you open the one end of the can, this is like the cranberry sauce trick. You want to punch a hole, just a little hole, that's all you need, to get some air in there and let that whole thing kind of slide out. And it usually comes out in mostly a couple big globs, and that's a pretty clean can. If you really want to get in there, we don't want to waste. You can get the last bits of that out with the spatula, but that's a pretty efficient way to get that out instead of scraping out the whole can. That I will usually get mixed in. Just break down the biggest part of it. Again, this is here to kind of fortify the soup. It gives a really nice body to the broth. It also gives it a nice color. It gets kind of a almost creamy quality to the broth. We're pretty well mixed in. Once that warms up too, it's going to loosen up just a little bit more. And we're going to put in our hominy, which we, again, drained, and I rinsed that a little bit. It gets some of the starch off of there. And lets it just kind of be kind of loose and fluffy and nice. So there's that in there. Again, we can mix that in. We're going to put the lid on and let this whole thing kind of come up to temperature. So you can see we've got a very full pot. This is a large amount of chili, but that's not a problem. It keeps really well for leftovers, and you can also freeze it if you're not feeding it really large. So chili's been going for about 10 minutes. You can hear it's nice and bubbly in there. I've been stirring it pretty regularly because you don't want those beans to burn on the bottom. It's boiling now, you can see. Really, that's enough to, you're at a point where you can serve it now. It doesn't really need to go any farther than that. The beans are already nice and tender, even straight out of the can. So really, we just let that kind of pull together, the spices and all the other ingredients kind of meld. If you let it go longer on low, it's going to get even better. But again, for a quick, regular, like weeknight meal, you're good to go at this point. We're going to plate this up. The way I like to do it is I'm going to put a little cheese on top. That's not going to make it vegan anymore, I realize. If I were entertaining vegan guests, or if I just wanted to keep it a little cleaner myself, I would probably just use some avocado on top. That's a nice touch. We're going to do some cheese and a little bit of some crackers with that. Sometimes I'll put sour cream or green onions. Today, a little cheddar cheese and some crackers. That's one of the things I think is interesting about all the regionalisms of chili. So that's it. It's a nice looking chili. It's got some nice variegation. It's got light and dark colors, a nice variety of beans. We're gonna top that up just a little bit, just for a little cheesy gooey in the middle. And then we're gonna put a few oyster crackers. If you want to leave a comment, you can leave a comment about how you like your chili. What's your favorite topping or your favorite accompaniment? Some people do grilled cheese, some people do peanut butter sandwiches, some people do cinnamon rolls. I've never quite gotten that, but I'm sure it's delicious. This is my vegetarian chili. I hope you enjoy. Please subscribe.